Good morning, Year 6. It's the 24th of February and this is your third session this week all about shapes, and today we're going to be moving on and developing our knowledge into reflecting shapes in a mirror line and in the axis of a grid. Now, if you yesterday you got to the point and you were asked to complete a shape that had half of it complete on the sheet, and you had the line of symmetry and you had to complete the second side, and you were finding that a little bit of a challenge, it might be worth at this point just spending your time working on that skill and developing that, because the completing a shape that's reflected on the other side of a mirror line or line of symmetry is a little bit of a trickier skill. So it builds on the work that you started on yesterday. So make sure you're secure at that first. Okay, so moving on, hopefully you've now completed your arithmetic practice and warmed yourself up, and we're going to be thinking about what is reflection and what does reflection look like. So the term reflection is a transformation where each point in the shape appears at an equal distance on the opposite side of a given line. You can see from these pictures here below how we talk about the reflection in water when we're talking about perhaps an image of a scene. You can often see pictures where you've got the real life image and the reflected image in the water, and that helps to show this idea of reflection in shapes. You've got the peak of the mountain here and it reflected in the water below. Unlike where the work you were doing yesterday, which was completing half completed shapes, where the line of symmetry was against one of the sides of those shapes, this time lots of the reflection work that we'll do, there is going to be a gap between the line of reflection, the mirror line, the line of symmetry, and the shape itself. So it's going to prove an additional challenge. So if you're ready for that, and I'm sure you are, we will move on. Okay, so these are the first shapes we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be thinking about how we can reflect these in the mirror line. Now you can see already, this one has got one of its vertices on the line, but the others are away from the line, as is the whole of this shape. So it proves an additional issue, and it can prove tricky when you're trying to reflect this shape on the other side of the mirror line. You can always check it by using a mirror if you have one to hand, but this is a way in which you can ensure that you've definitely got the shape reflected. So if we go back to our work on translations, you will remember that one of the strategies we put in place was to ensure that we were labeling all the vertices. So if I do that now, just to show you in different colors, so we've got A here, and let's change the color so we're just really clear which is which. So we've got a green one there, and we'll end with a red one. Now it makes sense to me to go to reflect the first vertices on this triangle. So we can see, if we look at the mirror line here, we have moved one grid space away from the line on this direction. So the same thing has to happen on the other side in line with that point of the shape, and that is where we've got our 1 point there, and then we're going to be 1 point away there. So we're going to have our point there. I'm going to remove that extra bit there just so you can not have too much information on the shape itself. There's our point C, quite nice and straightforward. I'm going to go for my next nearest point, because then I can be a bit more reliable and clear that I'm going to be on the right pathway to get the answer. So I've got here 2 away from this line. I'm going to keep it in line with this point as well. So I've got to make sure I've got to go 2 away, and I'm going to mark that here, A, and then we're going to go for our final point. So we've got here B, and B, now you need to watch carefully here, is we're lining it up along here this time. So we've got 1, I'll show you 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're 4 squares away from the line. So the same happens here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then mark that point there as B. And once we've got all our vertices labelled, then we can start forming our shape and joining it up in quite an easy way. So we've got all our parts of our shape forming, and then we have clearly reflected our triangle. So that's a nice straightforward one. We've got our vertical line. This one is a horizontal one. You might find that it's easier, as we talked before, to orientate your paper, turn your paper round. That helps you to visualize it better. Okay, but the same principle occurs for this one. Just trying to get that straight. So I'm not sure how straight it is, but it's quite close. So I'll label our points again. So we've got A, some different colors going on here. We've got B, and we've got our point C. Okay, so we've got our vertices labeled. Point A will not change, so we're going to leave that there. That's going to be the same because it's on that line of reflection, on that mirror line. And the next point we're going to be probably wanting to look at is this one. It's the closest to the line of symmetry, closest to that line. So it's 2 away from the mirror line. So we need to make sure that that one also goes 2 away on the other side, and labeling it is really important. Now this is where you're going to be accounting kind of across a shape. So you're going to be looking at this line, and we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 away from the line of reflection, the mirror line, the line of symmetry, and we're going to be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I can mark that as my point B. So once again, once you've got those points plotted, you can then start joining up your shape. Hopefully you can see, and then you'll be able to see that is the line reflected. You can use a mirror to check that, and perhaps you would want to turn your paper. I won't do that, I might spoil some of the formatting, but so that you can just check that they look the same, that it's a reflection of the shape on the other side of the line, the mirror line in this case, and the question asked about the mirror line. Okay, so we've got to the point of reflecting where there is a diagonal line involved. Now, personally, if you have the luxury of having a piece of paper in front of you where you have a diagonal mirror line like these, one of the nice strategies to use is make it a vertical one. So you're going back to what the vertical line would look like, mirror line would look like, and it makes things a little bit easier. This is certainly helpful when you're looking at shapes, so I would encourage you to use that strategy. I think I'm going to use that one. But if you decide that you're going to go with it that way, the shape, same strategies as before, you will still need to label all the vertices so that you can start deciding how far away from the mirror line those different vertices are on this right angled triangle. So I'm going to just orientate it like this. It helps me out a little bit. I will do this one without orientating so you can see the benefits of doing it with a vertical line or leaving it with a diagonal. So if you can see here, this is a nice strategy. I'm going to first of all label up these vertices. So I've got A, B, and I will label this one C. As long as they've got a label, it doesn't actually matter which one is A, B, or C. Okay, and we're looking here at this point A. Now I can see from this point A to the line is half of this square. So I'm going to need to go half again to get to the other side, and that is my point A. Now there's a couple of things that you might want to consider for doing this next. I would probably suggest that you look at C. It's the next closest to the line. You can do that in a couple of ways. You could be thinking, well, C travels this way down by 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to travel this way down by 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I can mark C. But if you wanted to check it, you could have a look at it on the distance from this point to the mirror line, to the line of reflection. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. So we're going to go half again, half, and then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I've got my point C ready in its position. And I know that that's correct because if I look at A here, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4 down as I explained before, and this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know I'm on the right tracks there. So looking now at B, if I just move this one slightly, I think we're going to need a bit more of the grid. So if you have a look at where B is in relation to the line, it gets a bit trickier because it kind of goes through half. Oh, that looks like an eighth of a square there. So it makes it a bit trickier to go across the line. At this point, I might encourage you to start your shape so you can start seeing what it will look like. And with that line already in place, I haven't asked you to do that in the translation work before because that wasn't useful until you'd actually translated the shape. But for this, it's quite useful because you can see already this A to C line is already reflected here to A to C. And then you should be able to spot that from C to B, we have 1, 2, 3 squares that it's got space used for. And also you might notice as we're looking at this, just coincidentally, we've got a border here of 1 square and we're thinking about a border of this square. So I'm going to travel up the 3 and then I'm going to do various checking points to check that I'm on track. So you might want to be using different colors for this to do your counting, to do your thinking, and then just get your solid black pencil line or pen to complete that last shape at the end. So I'm going to go up, as it said, 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to mark my position of B there. So then I can start looking at C to B, and I know that A and B go together there, which makes a nice successful reflection of that shape. Now that really helped me doing it with a vertical line. You could do exactly the same thing if the shape was turned around. I'll show you with this one here. But do be aware of when it's a diagonal line, it does prove an extra additional challenge. So you need to be conscious of that and maybe changing your paper order around, but certainly labeling and doing some very careful counting on the grid will really help you to establish where the different vertices are going to be placed in the reflected shape, and therefore you can be successful at the task. So moving on to this one, I won't orientate this one, I'll challenge myself on this one. I'm going to take some various points in this shape. You don't need to plot all of the shape, all of the points. It's a good strategy to do that, but as you start plotting, you might realise that you don't need them all. They're all not necessarily needed. So I've got my A, I'm going to put a B here. I'm actually going to make this my C, just there. I'm going to go for D, and then I've got my E here. Okay. Oh, change colour. So let's have a look. Green one will do. Shouting, oh, that's the wrong colour. Okay. So once again, this time I haven't turned my paper around. I'm still going to use the same strategy as before. Now, if you look at E, it's the closest to the line, so I'm going to go with that one. So I've got a whole grid square here, then half, and I've got another half, and then a whole. And if you notice, my line, the line I'm travelling in, is a straight line across. So I'm going to go from this point directly across. And actually, you might notice there's a little square in there that helped me see kind of, oh, I know that I'm in the right point there. So this is then going to be marked as my point E. Okay, so I've got a good starting point to my shape. Now, the next part I can do in the very same way to just check I'm on track with A. So for A, I've got my whole, I've got a half, I've got another half, and I've got one whole and another whole of the square. And as like before, I'm traveling in that straight line of travel. I'm trying to not put too many lines on this so you can see, and that becomes my label for A. There we go. So now I've got my E to A line, and as before, it might be useful for you to be joining up those lines at that point so that you can just see this bit is reflected here, so you can start to see how the shape is building. I'm going to go for my next obvious one, which is this one, D. It's not written very well, sorry. So looking at point D, it starts here. It goes through a whole shape, a whole shape, a whole shape. So it's going to go through 3 holes. And you can see actually there's a square there that's forming that I've travelled all the way through. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come out this side, 1, 2, 3, apologise for my wonky line there, and I'm going to mark this as D. Now we know that E goes to D, so I'm going to straight away line that up so that I know that I'm on the right track there. I think I'm going to go with B next. Now, rather than cutting across this, because I can't quite see the grid underneath that shape, I'm going to have a look at the relationship between A and B. I know there's a straight line there, and I know there is 1, 2, 3 squares in between A and B. So I'm going to do this very same thing here. So I'm actually going to start with my drawing for my shape. You might want to do it in pencil if you're doing things like this, so you can rub out and say, I've got 1, 2, and 3, and I know that that is going to be my point B. And there's lots and lots to think about when you're reflecting on a diagonal. So just be careful to gem up those skills with the symmetrical work from yesterday so that you're ready and prepared for this. Okay, so I've now got my point B, and I can check that it's the same because I can see it there. And actually you can sort of see, if you look at this bit here, if I highlight that in, you might be able to see it a bit clearer. There's a kind of little extra bit here. You can kind of see that that is the same as that area there. You can kind of see where that's coming from. So you can see the empty space against the shape. Now, C, I could go for C. I could go across shapes in the same way. In fact, I think it's probably D plus a half. In fact, it is, because look, here's our D plus an extra half there. So I know I'm on the right track with that. What I need to do is continuing going across half a shape there to get my point. C. If I wanted to check that, just look at from B to C. So B to C is across a diagonal there, and from C to D is across a diagonal. So therefore I know that this bit, no, it just fits on the grid, doesn't it? Lucky that. It's almost like it's planned. So there we can see that our shape has been reflected with this mirror line on a diagonal, which is a really tricky process to do. So using colours, but also turning that page as I did for the first shape might be really helpful to see how, to see it in a bit clearly, and to be able to orientate what the shape's going to look like. But also sometimes it's not always about counting from the line. Do it where you can, but where you can't, look at the relationship between each of the vertices and how they link on the first shape to help you with the reflection of the second. So there's lots and lots of skills can be put in place and practice for that. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to have a look at task 1. Some of them are quite nice and straightforward because you can see them on the gridded shape there. And in fact, number 2 is a really nice starting point because you can see it's actually linked to the mirror line, the line of reflection, the line of symmetry there. It does get a bit more complicated and very similar to the shapes we've just been looking at. So have a go at task 1 and have a go trying that out, and then pause the video and come back when you're ready to start looking at task 2. Okay, so welcome back. Now we could be asked this question and it refers to the x-axis and the y-axis, and it asks us to reflect the shape. And as you can see, these 2 shapes are in a grid but on 4 quadrants, so it does make it a little bit more confusing perhaps when you're faced with a question like this. So when we're thinking about the x-axis, we're looking at this horizontal line. So when we're reflecting, we're almost going to forget about this y-axis here and just focus on this horizontal line, and that is our line of reflection, our mirror line, our line of symmetry between this part, this side, and the other side. So the same principle as before, this is going to be reflected in the x-axis, this first one, and this one is in the y-axis. So we're thinking about this line here. So I'm going to make that line nice and bold and red so you can see it very clearly. There we go, that's our x-axis. So that's the one we're thinking about, and that's the one we're doing our reflection on. Same process as before. I would label your parts. So you've got your A and B and your C, and then working from the closest to the line first, I would go for your A. So it's one away there, so we're going to go one away over here to get our A. This one, we've got one away for our C, nice and straightforward. So this will be one away for our C. And this one, following on from that line, we're going to go from the line 1, 2, 3, 4. So from this line, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will be our B. And once we've got the vertices plotted, we can then start joining up. I've just got red that shape there, but you can see, at least you can see where it's been reflected. You can see how our shape has been reflected in the x-axis. Now, this one, you need to be really focused in on the y-axis and reflecting the shape in the y-axis. So we're not looking at the x-axis anymore. This is where our line of reflection is, our mirror line. Okay, so exact same principle. This is a little bit trickier because we have got a parallelogram there, so it makes it a little bit trickier to navigate, but same principle. So we've got our A, keep changing the colors just to keep you on your toes, B, C, and D, and do use letters or colors, whatever helps you to make this easier and clearer for you to organize and solve. So let's start with our one nearest here. We've got one away A, so one away will be A here, one away D, and therefore one away D will be here. I didn't pick up the right color there. I want to do it. Then I would look at this point here. Let's see. So this is from the line 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 away. So we're going to go the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh dear, I keep picking up the wrong color. Hopefully you get the idea. C. And then we're looking up here at where B is. So B is 1, 2, 3, 4 away. Well, we should have known that because it's parallel to C there. So we're going here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Checking. They're linking up. So that's my checking point there. And once I've got those plotted, I can then, a nice blue one there, link up my vertices to form my shape. Apologise for my mouse trying to draw a shape there. So you can see that that is reflected in the y-axis, and that will look like this if you want to see it without all the marks on it, but that is how we can see how to reflect and shape in the x-axis and the y-axis and what that means. So at this point you will be ready to go on to task 2. They are a little bit trickier, but just focusing on, remember, the x-axis, where that is, that's a horizontal line, and the y-axis being your vertical line, acting very similar. There's an extension to that task. Perhaps if you're finding that challenging, it might be one that's a little bit too much challenge for you. And task 3 asks you to think about whether she's correct or not, or how a shape has been reflected. There's a challenge which involves both looking at symmetrical lines and mirror lines, which sort of pulls all our knowledge in together. And as always, the answers can be found at the bottom for you to check. Move yourself on if you're finding it easy, or stick with a particular task to keep practicing those skills.